Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Well, for the past couple of days, I have been looking into the scientific and theory part of Dogman. Today, I'm just going to give you some terrifying encounters. Before we do that, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under this video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks can be found on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first encounter comes to us from Tennessee. So I was chilling at home while my other friends went hiking for the day. I wasn't invited on this hike because I had college courses all day. But when they got back, they recited to me an experience that had happened. So my friends, including my best friend Brandon, were hiking around the Cherokee National Park. Before they knew it, the sun had set. Brandon was trying to get down to the second part of the trail faster. He slid down a hill. Little did he know it, he had ripped his pocket and his cell phone had fallen out. He didn't know this until about 15 minutes later when he wanted to text somebody and couldn't find it. They were already pretty far out at this point, but they used SnapMap to see if they could find his phone. He ran back and grabbed it, picked it up, and put it securely in his unripped pocket. Then he heard a blood-curdling scream. Now, he's had similar experiences, but not this close. At first, he thought it was a mountain lion until they distinctly heard, "Help, over here." He walked up the incline and looked between the trees to see where the sound was coming from. And across the way, he saw a man standing on the neighboring mountain. The scream stopped, and he was just staring over at Brandon, an unmoving silhouette. This continued for a few seconds before Brandon's fight or flight kicked in, and he went with it and just started running as fast as he could back to the meeting grounds. He looked back once and recited to me that the eyes of whatever was chasing him were reflective and far too big to be a mountain lion. He ran for about 8 minutes before he ran into two other friends that were on the trip, Caleb and Alex, and they were like, "Dude, what's wrong?" Brandon wasted no time explaining and tells them to let's go run. So they did. They ran another 10 minutes. All the while, the three of them were exclaiming that they kept hearing screams in all different kinds of tones, male, female. They finally got back, still feeling the chasing, and urged everyone to get into the car. After that, they sped off and did not look back. They still have not gone back to this day. To me, it sounds like a skinwalker encounter, but what do you think? Because I know since they are Navajo creatures, they mostly reside in the Midwest area, but I just don't know what else it could have been. We're in East Tennessee. I live the furthest out from my friends, 25 minutes from the nearest town and walking distance from the Cherokee Park border. Well, exactly, he said it right. It is not a skinwalker because Navajos don't live in East Tennessee unless a Navajo witch doctor is vacationing in Tennessee and you and your friends did something really bad to it. So no, definitely not a skinwalker. Maybe a shapeshifter of some sort. Maybe a dogman. Maybe a Sasquatch. Maybe you didn't see a man, or your friend didn't see a man. He saw a silhouette, like exclaimed in the encounter. Maybe he just saw the silhouette of what he thought was a man. Who knows? definitely a terrifying encounter. What kind of made me, and I'm sure a lot of you listening to it, that it's not a man, was the reflective large eyes. Uh, so, either way, definitely not a skinwalker, or in my eyes, definitely not a Navajo skinwalker, but maybe a shapeshifter of some uh, Native American tribe that is in that area. Just my guess. Today's second encounter. I was born and raised in Pottstown, PA, and I still currently reside there. The sighting was about an hour west of Philadelphia and a half an hour away from Valley Forge. Anyway, last year, a friend and I went for a ride to catch up with an old friend. It was March 2020 on a Saturday night, and it just so happened to be the weekend the quarantine started. We were on Route 422 at around midnight, and it was odd because the highway is usually pretty busy on a Saturday night. But that night, we saw maybe 3 cars in the 30-minute ride. So we finished visiting our friend and started to make our way home. It was around 2:33 in the morning, and we were going westbound on 422. And again, we were pretty much the only car on the road. There's a patch of grass that divides the eastbound and westbound highway, and we were in the fast lane between the Collegeville and Royceford exit when all of a sudden we passed something to the left of us on the grass. We couldn't see it until we were right upon it, and only could catch a glimpse of it for a second. This thing looked like it was on all fours, maybe eating roadkill or something, but unfortunately I could only see it from like the waist or hips down. It was much larger than a deer and had large, unkept, straggly, orangish, reddish fur. Kind of like the color of a red fox, but a little lighter in color. What really gets me was the legs on this thing. It had canine-like legs, but they were huge and muscular. It just had that shape that instantly told me this thing was not something you wanted to mess with. The legs looked like the drawings I've seen of werewolves or something evil. Something told me that this thing could walk on 2 legs if it wanted to. After we passed it, I asked my friend who was driving, "Did you see that?" He replied, "Yeah." I asked him, "What was it?" He replied, "I don't know." Neither of us brought it up again during the ride because I think we were just trying to process what the heck we had seen and didn't want to sound crazy. When I got home, I told my boyfriend about it, and he had no idea what kind of animal that lives around there it could have been. Next time I saw my friend who was driving that night, we both agreed that whatever we saw did not fit any description of the animal that lives around that area. Also, it was scary looking. He calls it the beast. A couple of months later, another friend was leaving my house and heard something across the street making a low, guttural growling noise, which scared him straight to his car and out of there. He was an animal control officer for years and says nothing around here would make that noise. Then, about a month after that, my boyfriend was taking out the trash. When he got to the front door, he heard something scratching at the door and sniffing loudly. He said it sounded like a pig grunt sound, but obviously it was not a pig. This past October, my friend was sitting in his car in my driveway waiting for me to come outside. I noticed his doors were locked when I got to the car. He said he heard something that sounded kind of human, but didn't know what it was, and it scared him. Once I got into the car, I told him everything that I just shared and ended my story to him, saying, "A few months ago, I saw something on Route 422. And before I could say anything else, he said, "I saw it too." So I asked what color it was, and he described the same exact fur I saw. Then he said, when I saw it, it was running on 2 legs across the highway. And once it saw my car, it took off really fast, like nothing around here would be able to. My heart was beating so hard listening to him tell me this, because I know that he was not making it up. I was glad someone else had seen this thing. He doesn't know what it was, but said it was about 7 to 8 feet tall and looked nefarious. He agreed its legs looked evil. He saw it around the same time of year as me, and it was about the same time of night as well. I drive this highway all of the time and look for it every time, but haven't seen it since. Today's third encounter. I've heard deer make some pretty strange noises, but never heard one make a hissing noise myself. I'm not saying they can't. I've heard some noises in the woods that I can't explain, but the one that scared me the most was when I was 15 years old. I'd gone to bed at around 11 p.m. and was reading with the lights off except for the lamp beside my bed. It was about midnight, 12:30. I heard a faint noise coming from the creek bottom, about 3/4 of a mile away. We rented a house on a 300-acre cattle farm in southern Oregon. The 300 acres was backed up to a 2,000-acre timber company tract with no roads except logging trails. I'd heard bobcat, cougar, and all other calls before as my older brother and I hunted those woods all the time. This noise or call was different. It would start with a low-pitched moan or a howl, then rise into a high-pitched scream, and then at the end with this cough or grunt. It's hard to explain because I had never heard it before or since. The ending sounded kind of like the ending of an elk bugle with the large bull grunt, but not exactly. It kept coming closer toward the house, through the pasture, past the barns that were about 100 yards below the house. I'd gotten up and loaded my 30-30 lever action and started up the hallway toward the front door. Now, I was already scared, but what happened next filled me with terror. As I was walking by my parents' bedroom door, which was open, my dad said, "Son, stay in the house." I said, "What's that noise?" He said, "I don't know. I've never heard anything like it before." I froze in my tracks. I knew if my father was afraid of whatever it was at that point, I wanted no part of it. He was a World War II veteran, had hunted those same woods since he was a boy in the 30s, had walked everywhere he went until he got a car after returning from the war, night or day. The noise, call, or whatever it was so loud it felt like the windows were vibrating. I listened as it passed by the house in the pine thicket, crossed the highway, and faded out of hearing. The whole thing lasted 10 to 15 minutes. I have not heard anything even close to that until I was listening to some calls on YouTube, a so-called Bigfoot call. They made my hair tingle on my neck and brought back the old memories from years ago. Today's fourth part of the upload, I am going to introduce you to the Waipek, which is a creature from the Mexican Yucatan area. Way, which is spelled Huyay, means sorcerer or animal familiar. And Peck means dog, but there's actually a little more meaning to the second word, Peck, P-E-K. So Peck, although seemingly Peck may seem an absurd name, was in antiquity a Mayan name, the god of lightning and death in his canine form. By extension of meanings, Peck means dog. Do reflection, do brightness, can even do God do. So, in my translation of it, we are kind of looking at a humanoid dog, which only leaves one name for me, Dogman. At the end of the 17th century, a healer named Juan Mu lived in the town of Tikal, Yucatan. The sorcerer had the ability to transform into the Waipek, the sorcerer dog. This healer stood out for his powerful personality and was known as one of the most successful and popular doctors, who was called the Campeche and Quintaru. For his widespread fame, Wan Mu was highly respected among the population, even when the authorities did not want to accept him and branded him as a pagan. Who knows why the Holy Inquisition had not arrested him? When he performed his white magic works, he turned into a very large black dog, as the Spaniards were a bit incredulous. One day, Colonel Bixstein, accompanied by other soldiers, decided to watch Wan Mu from a house located on the street near a cemetery. After 3 nights, they saw a large dog, and the colonel drew his weapon to scare it away, because he did not believe it was the Waipek. When the animal realized it, it saw him with its big red eyes, gave a blood-curdling howl, and threw itself onto the man, who went back and dropped his weapon, afraid of using it before such a demonic creature. The other soldiers were scared and hid under the window, crossed themselves, and prayed. The next day, Colonel Almenez told everyone about the adventure he had with the dreaded Waipek, whom he had seen and convinced of its existence. Waipek continues to live to this day. In the state of the Yucatan, there is the belief that there is not only a Nahal witch, but many of them who affect people and animals with their bad actions. A news item that recently appeared on Radio Mayab TV tells that in the town of Tuskab, residents of several colonies in this southern town assure that a strange being that looks like a large black dog and walks on its hind legs wanders through the streets at night. A wave of panic and terror invades the neighbors of the colonies: Guadalupe, Miguel, Hedlago, San Esteban, and Tres Reyes. Of these southern towns, due to the rumors that circulate in the sense that a stranger, being big, black, walks the streets at night, and dogs howl in its wake. Due to the above, after 10 o'clock at night, people take refuge in their home and do not go out at all, since it is said that it is a Waipek, or dog witch. They fear being attacked by said entity, and they affirm that when he walks through the streets, domestic dogs bark in despair. Some neighbors have claimed to have seen it from their window of their dwellings and said that it is kind of a large dog which sometimes walks standing on its hind legs, and even a subject who risks going out and fouling it from afar assures that he saw as if he were a human. Today's final part of the upload. Stories from 2 men who grew up on the Zuni reservation just outside of Gallup, New Mexico. These are stories told to me by my 2 best friends of 20 years. I'm going to preface this by saying these 2 are some of the most honest people I had ever known, and it took them years before they would speak to me about this. Once I was able to convince them to tell me about this, the older of the 2 brothers broke down into tears and abruptly left about halfway through the first story. It was so traumatic for him to relive. I felt bad for that and haven't asked him to speak about it since that day. His younger brother, that I am closer with, provided the detail, as well as their cousin who carries a religious title that's essentially an enforcement position designated to deal with the presence of skinwalkers and related threats. This is very long. I was told by the Zunis that a bit different compared to other reservations on New Mexico, specifically because the United States government sanctioned land to all the native tribes. The Zuni didn't work with the government. Anybody who's traveled through New Mexico knows there's a casino on almost every res. The Zunis do not have a casino because they refuse to work with the government and specifically refuse to provide information about their heritage and the land they live upon. My buddy told me the tribe's elders taught him that the Zunis are in a specific area because they protected secrets of the land. I'm going to add a couple details that pertain to the story, and I'll explain on that later. Apparently, my friend's younger brother was born with a split tongue, like a lizard, and slits in his pupil instead of being round. You are probably making a face I made when I was first told, but keep in mind, all of this is religious to the Zunis. They are very serious about it. They do not allow non-tribal members this knowledge, nor do they allow the presence of non-Zunis. You can visit if uninvited. You can visit if invited, but would not be allowed to stay during certain times. Really quick though, if you think about that, split tongue. But what interested me was the slits in the pupil, meaning this person, if it is true, is able to see at night, almost like a nocturnal hunter, which we talked about in the Neanderthal comparative with Dogman. I'll start with the first story they shared when we were around 13 years old, and is the first experience of many that is too much for my friend to relive. He said that he was very young and was awoken abruptly in the night to a glass breaking. When he opened his eyes, his dad, already in his son's room, motioned for him to stay where he was and to be quiet while pointing a large revolver toward the kitchen where the window had broken. Not long after, his dad fired multiple shots. He then heard a screech so loud it hurt his ears, along with a scuffle in the next room, and saw a shadow on the wall that he said did not look or move anything like a person. Apparently, whatever was in the house immediately leapt out the same window that was broken to get in. He said the adults gathered and left to find it shortly after, but was never told what they found. Just that this was definitely a skinwalker. The day after he broke down into tears talking about it, I went and saw him and apologized, and surprisingly, he said the shadow and screeched he saw scared him and is ultimately why he left the res. I've never asked him about it again. Another instance that the older brother told me was one that left me particularly intrigued, though I'm not sure why compared to some of the other stories. He said they were having some sort of celebratory feast one night, and my friend saw that he described a very small person stealing their food while the adults were not looking. He said it was around 1 to 2 foot tall, and when he saw it, he immediately shouted to his dad, and all the adults dropped what they were doing and immediately started chasing it to corner it. This went on for a while, and during the commotion, they realized that there were multiple tiny beings, two of which were able to escape into the gutters. He said he remembers everyone trying to reach into the gutter and block them from getting away. But one was caught, and he distinctly remembers his uncle holding it up high by the leg, and he watched it scream in terror. It sounded like a tiny human. Then they immediately tied it up and stuffed him into a cloth pouch and burned him alive over the fire. He said the way it screamed while burned terrified him because he could hear how much pain it was in. But they are human-like. By the way he explained to them, they seem like something like a large lawn gnome. He doesn't know if they are necessarily evil, but they kill every single one they come across. Not sure why, but that one really creeped me out. The next I remember, the two brothers were together somewhere out in the wilderness hunting rabbit just outside of the res. They were walking home because the sun had just gone down, but came across a barely standing shack. Being dumb kids with a pellet gun, they went inside, and shortly after, a rock hit the wall of the shack. So they immediately go outside, and within seconds, notice commotion in the vegetation about 30 feet away. They had one flashlight, so they pointed it toward the movement, and a human-looking figure stood up, faced them, with its head tilted to the side, and described it as very, very pale with facial features that were not human, he said. I don't know how to explain it, man. It just didn't look like a person. So upon seeing that, they immediately took off running back to their home. And as soon as they did, they saw coyotes just standing alongside the trail, standing off to the side. But all were just staring at them with no fear of their presence, and followed them back. They said they were told by the elders they were being warned away, and the commotion in the grass was a skinwalker changing its form. They said they never went back to that area again, and the younger brother said he had never been so terrified. I'm glad the younger brother told me about that story instead of his older brother. The younger brother still today is able to better deal with the harsh realities. He told me that he and a couple of friends would play around this mountain and knew where the entrance to a cave was. They tried to go into the cave, but not far from the entrance. Got too small for him to fit, and even his 10-year-old torso wouldn't squeeze through the narrow opening. He said they were off to the side of the entrance, hiding from another friend walking toward them, and noticed something moving very, very fast going in and out of the cave entrance. He and his friends said they went back every day for over a week and would watch them for hours, but could never see what exactly they were. But were astounded at the speed they moved, but did not understand how they were getting in and out, as they were much bigger than he was. He was forbidden from ever going back after the adults found out what he and his friends were up to. As for their cousin that carries a title given to those who are there to deal with the skinwalkers, I ended up getting pretty close with him too, since his cousins are like family to me, and I picked his brain one night. He said they consider them a manifestation of pure evil. They are ruthless, and they know they are not supposed to be around the Zuni people. They are fully aware of their actions. If they find out a skinwalker is near, they immediately hunt it down, catch it, string it outside, down over a fire, and burn it alive till there is nothing left, bones and all. During that process, he says, the sounds they make is like nothing you would ever hear. He said you can't kill them with bullets, and there's different levels to their abilities. They can affect you in a variety of ways, but always in a negative fashion, such as leaving you sick or dead. If I remember correctly, there was a time of every year where everybody but him and the others with his title stay inside and lock the doors and block the windows, and he will then walk the town in specific clothing and chant specific words, then hunt skinwalkers with his peers. I didn't really understand, but it was implied that skinwalkers are expected to be present around this time, but he spoke about it like it's something completely normal. I think it's like a holiday. And during this week or so, there's a period where the skinwalkers arrive, and that's the main reason they designate enforcers that are trained to deal with them, and apparently never look the skinwalker in its eyes. One last story I'm going to share is not from a Zuni reservation. This story, my uncle told me, that takes place in a reservation outside of Bernalillo, a small city which is about 20 minutes away from Albuquerque, but I don't remember the name of the res. My uncle was a sniper in the military and saw combat in Panama. After leaving the military, he was a firearm instructor for the Albuquerque Police Department, then for the Bernalillo PD. One day he gets a call about a drunk guy acting strange at the base of the mountain, so he shows up, but he doesn't see anyone there. So he gets out and starts to look around, and at the base of the mountain he finds clothes neatly folded. As he turns around, he's surprised by what he calls the biggest wolf he had ever seen in his life, about 20 feet away, walking straight toward him. He said it was around 5 feet tall and staring him right in his eyes. So he immediately puts his hands on his holstered gun, but doesn't draw, and starts walking backward toward his car while the wolf continues toward him. Once he reached his unit, he got inside as fast as possible, and when he shut his door, it was now an inch away from the window. He said he had to look up at it while seated in his car. He then made a sorry I'm leaving gesture and drove down the road, where he met up with one of the reservation officers. She asked him what had happened, since he was pale and visibly shaking. All he was able to muster was, "I don't know, it's massive, and I don't think I belong here. I don't." And she immediately put her hand up and said, "Don't worry, I gotcha. I've been wondering when this would happen again. Go ahead and get out of here." Then she drove off. She didn't go to the area, but rather parked her car sideways, blocking the entrance to the area, and started making calls. He says by the way that thing was looking directly in his eyes, not to mention the absurd size and aggression, lack of fear, folded clothes, that he knew he was face to face with a skinwalker, and he hopes he never comes across something like that again. To end this, I'll talk about what the younger brother told me and showed me about their heritage. One day he took me out a box and showed me the contents, saying that his father had given it to him and had been passed down from father to son for over 1,000 years. Inside were a couple different dried plants and various things, but most notably, a rock carved by hand of a reptile-like humanoid. It looked like a person, but with armored scales and a face with a protruding mouth and large teeth. I don't want anybody to think I'm a conspiracy theorist, cause I'm not, but this thing looked exactly like what I've heard reptilian aliens would look like. We were both pretty amazed, as he had never really thought twice about what it would mean. Around this time, we were getting stoned and entertaining ourselves with aliens and laughing about conspiracy theories. Keep in mind, this is the guy who was born with the split tongue and slits in his eyes. His mother confirmed that to me as well. He went on to tell me the Zunis are protecting the secrets of the land, and their reservation does not have a casino because they refuse to sell out their knowledge to the government. He said he was taught that beings came out from inside of the earth and met with their people thousands of years ago. These beings lived somewhere inside of the earth where it's warm, and eventually these reptilian beings went back to live under the surface. I don't remember if they went back into the earth after they had some feud or war, or if it's because the outsiders arriving, but after they met the ancient Zunis for a short time, they bred with each other. My buddy is apparently a descendant of those two species mixing, and is why he was born with a split tongue and slits in his pupils. Now, I don't know what connection skinwalkers have to this reptilian species that live inside of the earth, or roasting tiny food thieves and celebrating while they scream through an agonizing death, but I do find it very interesting that all of this is associated with native belief. I plan on going over all this with him as well, as I'm going off of memory from 5 to 20 years ago. The younger brother is my closest friend, so maybe I can get some more info from him. All I have to say is that last part of the upload gave me more questions than answers. That's insane. So, I mean, we've all heard of reptilians living underground. There's an encounter I've talked about. I forget where it was. Maybe the Sonoran Desert. Probably not, but California, where a boy and his brother were out and they found a cave and they found this rod, and these reptilian like creatures ended up following them to their home at night and ended up getting the rod back. The mother even witnessed it. definitely just totally strange. I'm I'm at a loss of words, actually. My brain is going about 1,000 miles a minute trying to think about this. Um, I know the Zunis are a very powerful people in their beliefs, their magic, much like the Navajo. Uh, Actually, all Native Americans are powerful in their beliefs and magic, but there are those ones that are just associated with that power. Some more powerful than others in war or agriculture or what have you, but as far as the keepers of knowledge, I'm guessing it would be the Zunis now, wouldn't it? So, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. With that, I want to bid you all farewell. Please be kind to each other, and may the Great Spirit watch over all of us and guide us through our path of life.